studio with me is Dr. Nansata Yakubu, who is a political analyst and a democracy engineer. Good to see you.
Good morning, Aja.
Good morning, Doc. This is the biggest opposition party, and this primaries will give an indication of how the party will fare in the 2020 general elections, correct?
Correct. Today is an exciting day for the National Democratic Congress across the country. We know they are not holding elections in all the constituencies. It's 157. They are not holding for 38.
Yes.
And then there are a few that a few days ago, the General Secretary announced that they had disqualified some people. But for the delegates, it's a big day because the candidates can only be voted for by an electoral college that the NDC itself has agreed on. And as you would have heard from some of the correspondents, the numbers vary across the country. In some places, there are maybe 700, 780. Some places, they are up to 900, and some places, they are up to 1,000 plus to vote for people. What's going to be interesting to see is first-time MPs. Yeah. First-time MPs, those who won the last time on the ticket, whereas the party itself exited at the national executive, they got in at Parliament. It will be interesting to see the dynamics of that. It will be interesting to see women. Yeah. You know, how many women get voted. We know the numbers are not up to 10% of the current figures. I think we have up to 524 in 157, and it's not about 10% are not even women. So, but it will be interesting to see how many women, you know, also get voted. Then it will be interesting to see constituencies where you have long-serving MPs who are not going for the office anymore. So we all know the Nadoli Khalil one, which Honorable Bagbin is not standing. So it's interesting to see who the new players are going to be. And then we also have a big demographic.
Inusaf Husseini, yes. Dr. Hello is not going.
Yes.
And I mean,
and
number
more
of
others.
them.
Yes. So it will be interesting to see.
Kwete is not going.
Exactly. So it will be good to see. And then it will also be good to see another dynamic. That would be young people. You know, we have very young people like Stanley in Volta region who are standing. And then it will be good to see how people like Honorable Aveji, you know, would also fare. So we are looking across to see how the delegates would put the ballot this morning. I think a lot of them are still arriving at the stations, and then maybe much later in the day, the results would come. In the lead up to this primaries, we've seen a number of events happening. You've just enumerated a few of them, that they had to dissolve some of, or disqualify some of the constituencies, and so some of them will not be having voting there. There are some other constituencies where they are going unopposed. So there will be a constituency like Ododo, for instance, they are going unopposed, so there won't be any such primaries there. But we've also seen, for instance, in Akachi North, the electoral committee there was dissolved on Tuesday and replaced with another. The explanation is that it cannot be trusted for a fair or credible primaries. How does all of this come across to you? We've seen how the NDC has organized previous primaries. How does this one come across to you? It was very interesting to hear that, because usually you would have all kinds of allegations and maybe rumors for delegates. And then in these times, people would tell you, I wish I was a delegate, because people seem to think that it's a position of opportunity for getting some gains from the candidates, so to speak. If the committee was dissolved, there must have been evidence to suggest that they were compromised. And maybe the party had such evidence and presented it and felt that it wasn't fair to all the candidates being represented. I'm thinking it would have had to do with one or two candidates. And it could be pronouncements, it could be evidence of, receiving gifts, as we would call it. Or it could also be that people were biased against a particular candidate, or campaigning for other colleagues to not vote for that candidate. So in order to make it free and fair, or to give the same level of opportunity to all the people seeking the seat, I think it's fair that it's dissolved and then new people are brought in. The only thing we wouldn't know is to what extent these new people are neutral or much more placed to do a better job than those that were, disqualified. That's the only thing we wouldn't know. But of course, we also have seen how the strongholds is just, there's been
there's been conversations about people who win in NDC strongholds. For instance, in the Volta region, many of the constituencies are for the NDC. So it's just a done deal for whoever wins the primaries. It means that you surely have a ticket to go to Parliament. But how it's actually different for areas that are strongholds for the NPP. And I like to find out what you think about the people that they're putting up for those constituencies. And of course, the role that the party is playing in ensuring that they get the right candidate for those constituencies, knowing very well that those candidates will play a key role in actually bringing the president or their presidential candidates back to power. In Ayawaso West Wuogon, for instance, I mean, history has told us that it's an NPP constituency. And of course, it's being, it's now the incumbent member of parliament is actually the wife of the late MP who died. And we know what happened. We know the dynamics in that area. I mean, just in the by-elections, we saw what happened over there. John Domelo and Efua Adoboy are the people aspiring to be candidates whoever wins this race means that person is going to face Lydia Sarah Malasan. And she's a tough woman. Look at these people, and what do you think about this selection?
Every political party seeks to put its best candidate in very difficult places. Best candidate in terms of they look at who they think would win the seat if given the opportunity to match against the opposition.
Yeah.
For seats in the Volta region that, as you said, are a done deal if you win them, it means that the primaries to an extent would have to be a very rigorous process so that you put in the candidate that you think best would give you the national result when you are faced with your opposition. So even though you might think that if you win a seat like Ketu North or Ketu South, South Tongu, it means you are going to win anyway to Parliament. The path to get to that seat is where the challenges are. You've heard committees being dissolved and committees here. So that's where they would put in that track and allegations flying about and all that. Now, in the case of Ayawaso West Wuogon, in as much as it's an MPP seat, and the dynamics which brought the current MP into the office through the by-election, you should also know that the NDC has always fielded its best candidates to also face off with the opposition. Okay. And the candidate who faced Lydia Alassane, there was a lot of acrimony around why he wouldn't have won, you know, so to speak. Yeah. When the final results were mentioned, he pulled out at last minute, there were gunshots, we all saw all that. So all those dynamics would still come to reflect when we go for the national vote. That is not to say that the same events would unfold, but that coming from that kind of background, people would feed, you know, into that, and there will be a lot of interest. Now, the interesting thing is, if the former MP, Honorable Chiramante, the late MP, was still here, he would be fielding against somebody who is a novice. Yeah. It will be a first-time person, you know, coming. So you would say, you know, it doesn't. But in this case, it's not that person. Lydia is Honorable Sarah herself is new, and then is going to face this person. So it will be interesting to see.
But wouldn't those dynamics play for her, knowing very well that people say that she's been one of the sponsors or one of the people who have been pushing the husband? So, I mean, she's not, she's a known face to that constituency, and it showed during the elections.
It does, but if you look at the percentages for the by-election, you know, the national vote, you have more people coming in, you have more votes and all. And also the national vote is not just a party interest-based vote. Okay. Not for the NDC or not for the MPP. There are a lot of people who live in that constituency who don't really, you know, belong to any like party. And then they go and vote for the candidate they think is best suited for that. So what we should watch out is how interesting it will be to say that, okay, she is now actually coming into the national vote, because this vote was a by-election. So usually for a by-election, yes, it's an endorsement, but sometimes it's also an endorsement of the party's performance itself, because people cannot, you know, really benchmark you against anything. So once your party is in power and you win that, sometimes it's like legitimizing the party in power to say, yes, they are really doing so. We give it to their candidate. So let's see how she would now perform with the campaigning, with whatever. The good news for her is because she's already been there and then started some work. And as you said, she's a known face in the constituency. It stands to reason that she will get a lot of mileage. What would be interesting though is to see how Mr. Dumelo would perform, because from the kind of background, professional background he's coming on, he's also a known face. Maybe not known for his political inclinations until the last elections that we think he was interested. I think a lot of us didn't even think he would run. We just thought maybe, but he's putting himself up for office, and so it will be good to see how.
But for you, what will be the hurdle that he would have to cross, knowing the kind of person he's going to contest in case he wins the primaries?
Well, he's contesting with another. So in case, even if he or the other person will, let's just say whoever wins the primary, this is what they are going to face. That constituency is one of the constituencies that it doesn't have to just do with the candidate. It's party machinery. You know, there are some constituencies that a particular party has to win. It's like,
it's just their
it's something that they strategize for, they plan for, they put out, you know, resources for, they help to campaign.
In the last election, for instance, in the 2016 elections, we've seen some constituencies that are strongholds of the NDC, but they lost to the NPP. So anything can happen.
Yes, anything can happen, but that's what it goes back to validate what I was saying earlier, that sometimes it's an endorsement of the party that makes you win, rather than just you in your own right. And at the same time, sometimes it's a rejection of the party that makes you lose, rather than it just being on your own merit. You know, the dynamics for the 2016 elections were, you know, quite interesting, and the two parties put themselves. You know, they really did a very good job, but it was left to the Ghanaian population to vote. And people just felt that we needed that change. We want to change this person. And you are changing both. You change the president, you change the parliament and things like that.
You saw more NDC members going to parliament, yet their candidate lost.
Yes, because in some constituencies, you know, the adage with the skirt and blouse was what worked. So I vote for my MP, but I don't want the national ballot for the presidential candidate. So I vote for a different presidential candidate, but I vote for my member of parliament.
Does it also have anything to do with the kind of people they elect from the primaries? I mean, from the word go. I mean, today you are electing people who will represent you in the main elections. Does it play in favor of the party? I mean, the skirt and blouse dynamics?
It does. It does, because to a large extent, when the process for choosing the primaries, the candidates at the primaries is flawed, it can impact, it kind of ripples across. For instance, there are times when the candidate is unpopular. Even the 2 or 3, you'll be surprised sometimes even up to the 6. There are 6 candidates for a particular constituency, yet the electorate are thinking this other person should have been in the mix for the opportunity. So when that person loses out of not being in the mix, then the person decides to go for independent. And when the person goes for independent, then the one who won out of the 6 now has to compete with this independent person. Now your base is one particular party. So if your base is MPP and you are going for independent, you have already split the votes for the base. So in that case, your opposition can win the seat. Because there are people who are non-aligned, but then you also have a base who would consciously campaign for you. And then the party base would go and vote for one candidate or the other. So if you split the votes, then you lose out because the other party is aggregated. The numbers are intact. So they then go forward. You just heard the gentleman reporting for the Laura constituency and what happened and why they are thinking they can use a different strategy, you know, to get it back. So it happens in some cases.
It's interesting, and I want us to look at some focus areas in Greater Accra, for instance, and we just spoke with our correspondent in Ningo Pram Pram. We know that Sam George and Michael Kwete Tete are the ones contesting that seat. Clote Kole, we have Zanato Ajeman Rawlings, we have Leaford Pakokwashi, and we have Muhammad Bashir Nina Alema. 2 of them are very popular faces, and the incumbent Zaneto Ajimanrol is a very strong woman there. In Adentan constituency, we have Nano Yelita and Mohammed Adamu Ramadan aspiring to lead on the NDC's ticket in the national parliamentary elections. And in Ayawaso West Wogon, we just talked about John Kofi Sato Domelo and Efwa Adoboy, who are also aspiring to be candidates for that area. In Abokobi Madina, we have Ibrahim Faila Fusaini and Rukaya Javier Sosu. I don't know if she's related to Lawyer Susu, who is also contesting in Medina, and Sidi Abubakar Musa are the ones contesting for the Abokobi Medina area. And Shai Osudoku, we have Linda Akwele Oklu, David Tete Assuming, and Michael Kwesa White. We also know that Michael Kwesa White is a popular name, and we'll be looking at how that plays for all the three candidates. Tema East, we have Isaac Ashia Odamte, and we have Edward Ni Tete Bediako Kraku, who are aspiring to be candidates for that area. In Central, we have Sedinam Eyiram Mantanawi and Ebi Bright. We also have Carl over there, three of them aspiring for that seat. Tema West, we have Wakefield Ekueku and Romeo Akahoho. And then we also have Raphael Kwesi Sapon Tufo, who is also, three of them here also vying for that position. But I want us to look at women representation. In all the names I mentioned, you can actually pick how many women are in there. In the Central region, for instance, I know 54 people are contesting, and out of that, 8 people are women. 8 out of 54 are women. Are you impressed with the women representation, which roughly people think is about 20% of all the, it's not up to 20% of all the people who have put themselves for the position?
Yeah, it's the women representation is less than 20%. I don't think it's up to 20%. We were crunching the numbers earlier before coming on the show, and we are not, it's not up to 20%, which includes those who are already in there, like Zaneto, and then people who are seeking to come in, like Georgina and Co. The representation of women, I think it runs across all the political parties, and even into the local government elections, the assembly elections, which are also coming up this year. There have been a lot of talks about what kind of strategies, political parties should put in place to encourage more women to participate. If you look at the way our political parties are structured, when it comes to the work, to organizing the political campaigns, to actually implementing the programs, women are the biggest cohorts that you can find. So the base is big for women. You would find them, attending rallies, doing all the legwork and all that. But as you go up the pinnacle of the party, then it dwindles and then becomes so it's like a big pyramid, big base, and then at the top, in some of the political parties, even up to the executive level, you can just find women. And sometimes they are in token, positions, deputy, second vice or third vice, things like that. You're not really encouraged into strategic positions. So it's not impressive. And it's not impressive for most of the or even all, I can't say most, all the political parties. There's been the call, though, in the past couple of months to try to, advocate to see if one of the political parties would be, I don't know whether to use the word brave enough or really come on and match their presidential candidate with a woman as a vice presidential candidate, leading to, the notion that we could let a woman go for the higher national office. But we are not getting any encouraging, news in that corner. I haven't heard anything, whether rumors or real, to that intent. What has been advocated is back to this issue of constituency safe seat, what they call the safe seat theory. So the safe seat theory, for instance, what you are looking for is a constituency that no matter who you put there for one particular party, is going to be a woman. So there's a constituency in the Volta region. I think I missed it. I think it's 2 women contesting in the Volta region. We'll pull it up, and I don't think it's Hohoi. It's one of something. We'll pull it up. Just 2 women contest. So in that case, it's 2 women contesting. So the winner is going to be a woman. That's the first. Now, it's 2 competent women contesting. That's the next step to take. So the winner is going to be a woman who is also competent. So if this woman then stands against opposition for the national ballot and wins, then you have a woman in parliament. That's for that particular seat. Now, there are some seats that we know, no matter what you put there, it's going to be a particular party. So the call has been to work out a safe seat theory where all the candidates are vetted in a way that it's women. competent, qualified women, 5 of them, or 6 of them, to go for the primaries, and then one gets voted. So you know that it ensures that it does. Ghana is not open to quotas, like what happened in Rwanda and things like that. We are not open to quotas. So what we need to do is to work through the political party system to be able to encourage more women, you know, to come into office. Yeah, that's what we have to do.
Right. Let's look at the Ashanti region and look at some of the focus areas. And in the Setre Afram Plains, we have. I like to use the updated data on that. Let's look at that. Okay. So Setre Afram Plains, we have Honorable Donko Fuseini, Mr. Denisousu Dankwa, and Honorable Alex Adumako Mensah. And we all know how this area plays out. Setre Afram Plains has seen the NDC win the seat for 2 terms since the creation of the constituency, with Alex Adumako Mensah as the MP. It is going to be a tough contest between Alex and Donko Fuseini, who happens to be the former and the first DCE of that district. And in Ahafo Ano Southeast, we have Chris Bwedi, who in 2016, as first timer, lost the bid with less than 3,000 votes difference. And he's likely to cause an upset with enough resources and time to work in the constituency. And it's also a possible seat for the NDC to take, even after. So whoever wins this primaries, is going to be a done deal for that person. And NDC in Asawase, we have NDC never losing that seat, and you know who is representing the NDC, Muntaka Mubarak. I mean, in fact, in the lead up to this primaries, we've seen all the issues that happened in that constituency. The other contender, who is also Mubarak, was prevented from going to present his nomination forms. The offices were locked under key, and all the issues. We saw people burning ties in that area. For you, is it a healthy thing for the NDC, knowing very well that that area is actually a stronghold for them, so they actually don't want to jeopardize the fortunes that they've already prepared on the ground in that area?
Inherently, it is because the candidate that gets through the process knows that there's a higher opportunity for them to win the national vote for that. So that is why the process is being handled like that. So you have to make sure that the primaries, you win that. Okay. Now, Muntaka has been there for a while, and we know even the national vote is not easy against the opposition when he even gets. So now it's translated into the primaries. Now, competition is good. Competition is good, but it's healthy competition that we are all, you know, looking out for. But people will take out their frustrations because they don't know any other avenue, you know, to really exercise. I mean, how much can you go to maybe on air and say things against your candidate and all that, when at the base the person is going to win anyway? Definitely. So that's how sometimes they express it, you know, in that when it becomes a violent issue. But that should not be. So now what's going to happen is, if the party itself is unraveling around their own processes, then it gives opportunity for the other parties there to say, look, they are not representative of the Asawase constituency, because so there's opportunity for us to come to penetrate, and then we can do a better job of it. So that is why the NDC always has to make sure that they resolve those issues amicably and get to the base. Because the fact that you have a lot of people voting for the party, as we said, doesn't mean they are the only people in the constituency. There are other parties also represented in the constituency. So healthy competition is what is needed, and not violence. I will come back to that women representation conversation, because we've not exhausted that yet. But in Offenso North, we have Mr. Nanaya Obafo Frimpong, Mr. Echampon Caesar Ofosu. 2 of the candidates are aspiring for that. And Offenso North has been promising for the NDC. The parliamentary candidate till 2016 had been losing narrowly. That's less than 1,000 votes. In fact, there has been instances where the presidential candidate of the NDC won more votes than that of the NPP. And so you have these 2 people over there, Nanaya Obafo Frimpong, Mr. Echampon Caesar Ofosu, who are going to be battling it out there. In a Jura, Setre Dumase, we have 3 candidates, and Honorable Mohammed Bawa Brima is one of them, and Mr. Taufik Modestus is also another.
Mr. Peter Abuaje is there. And just so you may know, the NDC has lost that seat once. And even with that, the presidential candidate won there. The current MP, Bawa Mohammed, has been the bitterest enemy to the former MP, Pangabu, not contesting though, but sponsoring one of the candidates, who is Tafik, to unseat the MP. This is a traditional NDC seat, but not with wider margins. Of course, we've seen the dynamics, and anything could happen. And in New Edubiase, we have Abdul Salam. And until 2016, the NDC has always held the seat, but lost due to disunity. The former MP is not contesting, making it easier for the NDC to possibly reclaim that seat. In Ofinso South, Yusuf Haruna is contesting in Ofinso South. The NDC does well in terms of numbers for presidential candidates, but no impact for parliamentary candidates. Let's hope that Yusuf Haruna has something to offer in that constituency. And in the Ahafuano South constituency, we have Chris Bwedi Mensah, who's aspiring to lead the party into the parliamentary elections. The candidate was the MP in 2012, but he lost in 2016 due to internal disunity. The internal disunity we've been talking about. And he's going unopposed, and he may create the environment for unity and a possible win in the 2020 polls. This is never a traditional seat for any party, so it swings. Based on how you play your cards. It can swing to your side. So we'll be looking at how that plays in Ketu North. And remember, on Stronghold, I mean, for the whole week, sharing up to today, on Stronghold, which was launched on the Pulse on the JoyNews channel, we've been talking to constituents in the Volta region, and most of the constituencies that are strongholds for the NDC. We didn't talk or go to Ketu North, but look at what will happen in Ketu North. Honorable Dr. James Kluche Aveji has been in Parliament for quite some time now. He's actually the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and he's the deputy minority leader in Parliament. Now, Honorable Wisdom Nyamweme is also aspiring for that seat. Don Emmanuel Agbanyo is also aspiring for that seat. Mr. Gabriel Kwamigan is also. So 4 people are contesting that seat. It's going to be a keen contest, looking at who these 3 candidates are going to be challenging. And I tell you, Dr. Kluche Aveji also has is very positive about winning in that constituency. Now, the incumbent is the competition to beat, and of course, I've been telling you that. But it will be hard, judging from his popularity in that constituency and his contributions in Parliament. And he's seen by the party's hierarchy in the region as an asset. The rest of the aspirants are counting on the fact that they reside in the constituency and seem to be closer to the needs of the people. But that's not the only things that you need to win such an election. In North Dai, Honorable Joyce Lintete is going, Patricia Kachakbo is going, and this is an all-female contest. It's very interesting, and I like to see more of that, which we are not seeing in this whole, I mean, generally, we are not seeing more women represented. It will be interesting to watch this, because the incumbent could become a one-term MP if she loses the primaries. Interestingly, the incumbent won over the current regional vice chairman of the party, George Lowe, in the last primaries in 2015, making George Lowe a one-term member of parliament. But I mean, talking about this whole all-female contest is what interests me. What is accounting? And it's a general thing with all the parties. What is accounting for the less women representation we're seeing with the political parties? There
are a lot of things. First, the structures of the political parties themselves. The patriarchy is entrenched. There are a lot of spaces that are not open for women to really articulate and aspire.
Okay.
They would sometimes say, yes, we are encouraging more women too, but the contest is not easy.
Would you blame the parties who say that some of the women are not putting themselves up?
The point is not about some of the women are not putting themselves up. When parties want to encourage women to do the work, the foundational work for platforms, for rallies, for the campaign, the strategy. They find the women to do the strategy.
Okay.
They find the women to do the work that would bring the party to power.
Okay.
You understand? But when it is time to find the women to come into positions of power,
okay,
that is where the challenge is.
Okay.
You know, the path to power, the means to power, yes, they would work with women, but the positions of power is where they leave out women. That's one thing. The second, so the structure itself is not very open.
Okay.
The second issue is that the contests are brutal.
Okay.
I'm not saying a lot of women cannot, you know, stand. No. I mean, you know, we can. Yeah, you can stand the pressure. But if you see the kind of politics we run, it's brutal, especially for the parliamentary primaries. You would see all these things, and you would see how people, you know, the story of the delegates and what happens before they vote and those kind of things. There are a lot of compromises and issues that happen, and the whole contest is brutal.
Okay.
We haven't been able to outline the parliamentary vote process in a way that people really understand the real mandate of an MP.
Okay.
If you listen to why somebody would prefer a candidate over the other, it's about the person coming to make roads, coming to build hospitals, coming to give them good drinking water, electricity and things. But we all know that is not the role of the MP. So those are the things that you need to watch. We haven't the system is not clear. So you put women go in as candidates, and then they become the compromised ones because they get left out of the processes. In North Dai, for instance, I am sure it wasn't only the two women who picked the forms. Definitely, it was both. You know, both sexes, men picked, women picked. But after the processes, you know, to review the applications and all that, they probably came up tops. So that is why you would have, you know, that happening. And that is because it might be a constituency that was more open and more welcoming. And to also say that Honorable Tete unseated Honorable Low in the last, maybe it's that has made, even the constituents also open, you know, to women leadership at that level. So the party structures are not, and then there's also the issue about the financing. Okay. You know, there's not a lot of financing for campaign and all that. Yes, the argument would be that, but where do the men go and find, you know, the money or whatever to campaign? But I'm just saying that if the playing field is leveled, you have more women, you know, being encouraged. Then you also have the culture, you know, the culture issue. There are a lot of women who face opposition, even from within their own families, you know, about elections and things like that. Campaigning, for instance, you probably will campaign up into the AMs, you know, and then people will start asking questions like, whilst you are here, what's happening to your family, your kids, forgetting that whilst the man is also there, the kids are not having, you know, because we have kind of set up those gendered roles that should define, yes, you should be there, and then, you know, the man should, in cases where we've had some, I mean, we can't name them, but we've had some female members of parliament whose husbands actually go to support them to campaign, and people call them aside and say, why are you here holding her handbag? You know, why are you not the one in that position and things like that? You have all those, you know, and some men have to fight other men to be able to even encourage their own spouses, you know, to step forward for the office.
It's interesting, but how would you rate the opposition NDC, for instance, with regards to giving women the opportunity to be represented in Parliament, for instance?
Well, I think it's not even just for the NDC, but even for the MPP. Both parties would argue that they are doing, you know, their best to ensure that women representation is augmented. But from the beginning of the Fourth Republic, we haven't made any significant. It's either 15, 16, 17, 18,
and you cannot
20, 15, 16. No, you can't. No,
members of Parliament.
We can't. It's not on. And then that's one. Yeah. Number two, the leadership of the political parties themselves have not demonstrated that they are willing. They are putting action into what they are saying.
So the will is not there.
The will is not there. We had former President Mills, may God rest his soul, what he said about there not being women and what the women collective did with putting forward, you know. And we've heard from the current president at the Women Deliver Summit on how there are no dynamic women. So how are you? None of them. I think the only person maybe would say that the only political party that has demonstrated is PPP. Yeah. Because consistently, Dr. Indu has always put forward women, female vice presidents. We had Eva Loko, well, she passed, and then Bridget Jogonuku at the last election. So at least, you know, and of course, you know, when you say Kuyadonko, people want to smile, but the truth is that she also is willing and putting herself up, you know, for public office, as well as the former first lady.
Let's
Nana
go.
I want
so
those are some of the dynamics.
The Adentan constituency, where we have another strong woman seeking to lead the NDC in the parliamentary elections. Nana Oyelisa, she's being Minister for Gender and Children Affairs, and she's being an activist. We know that she's being a human rights activist and all of that. She's a lawyer herself, and she's contesting Mohammed Adamu Ramadan. And well, I will say that Nana Oyelisa may be quite popular than this second name we're seeing, but in the constituency, I mean, I cannot say same because I don't know the kind of work they've done there. But what are the chances of Nana Oyelisa, for instance, looking at her pedigree and her track record?
The interesting thing about that constituency is that it's I think we would only know when they finish counting the votes. Because just as you said, she might be popular, but she's popular with the rest of us. In the constituency, would her popularity necessarily reflect in the delegate vote? That's what we have to look out for. Now, the interesting thing is that, you know, Ramadan put himself up at the last election. The last election, he contested, and you saw the numbers, and he lost. Now, after that, apparently, he has not relented in his efforts with the touching base in the community, continuing to work for the party at that level, you know, and things like that. So he's quite popular with the base, he's popular with the delegates, he's popular with the party leadership. The same applies to Nanoye. She's gone into executive office. She's come out. She wants to put herself up for the primaries, and she's also worked hard in the constituency with the base. You know, she's worked hard for the party office, and she's in touch with the needs and the issues that the people in the constituency would want her to articulate if she gets there. So those two people, it's going to be a tough one, you know, to call, because they are equally up to the task. So I think they would have to vote. We would need to count the votes before we can really say who would make traction. If she wasn't standing and it was just let's say another name, I would say that Ramadan would win because he has a lot of mileage, and because of his performance in the last election and all that, and people in the constituency generally seem to think that he's done quite well. But because it's her, you know, and what she has also done for the constituency, then you cannot, you know, they would say, well, they are both good, and then we want to see what would come out from the ballot. So
let me take you to one of the largest constituencies in the Volta region, and it is the whole central constituency. And over there, you have 5 people aspiring. I mean, 6 of them aspiring, including the incumbent, Honorable Benjamin Komla-Kpodo, who is the incumbent member of parliament. You have Mr. Emmanuel Kafui Jamefe. You have Honorable Eric Seram Bene, Mr. Gordon Akpadi, Mr. Edem Kofi Kotosu, and Honorable Stanley Nelvis Glatte. 6 of them aspiring to lead the party in the parliamentary elections. But this is one of the largest constituencies in the region. It produces huge numbers for the NDC. The incumbent, Bodo, wants a 3rd term, and he's the oldest in the contest. The 5 more are quite youthful, and I had one of them in the studio who seemed to resonate very well with the youth. But Bodo, together with the Keta MP Richard Kwashiga, won a case in court against the capping of the District Assembly Common Fund, and is counting on several developmental projects he lobbied for as a major campaign trump card. Stanley Glatte is the youngest in his mid-30s. He's the longest-serving constituency secretary so far. Gordon Akpadi, a lawyer, contested the incumbent in the last 2 primaries. This is his 3rd attempt. His popularity seems to have been on the ascendancy with each primaries. Emmanuel Kafui Jamefe is a well-known party activist and former assemblyman who has been very vocal in the assembly. And Eric Seram Bene is the current president member of the whole municipal assembly, another youthful and vibrant party activist who is also banking his hope on the support of the youth. Now, you talk of Edom Kotosu, and he's a known face and an activist, very regular on it's a regular radio panel, and he's also counting on his popularity and support of the youth in the party. The numbers contesting this seat could play in the advantage of the incumbent if the rest splits the needs votes to win over the incumbent. But in the whole of this week, we've been in the Volta region, and Ho Central is one of the constituencies we engaged on our program, the Stronghold, which we launched gearing up to this primaries. We know that that is a stronghold for the NDC, and indeed many have said that whoever wins that seat is a done deal for that person to go to Parliament. But indeed we've also heard from the constituents, and the accusation has been that the NDC has not been fair to a region that has been described as your World Bank. And in Ho Central, which is one of the largest, you hear constituents talk about very basic amenities like water, electricity, and we've heard about some water shortage and all of that. You talk about unemployment, youth unemployment. You've heard about bad roads in that area. For all this while, it's been an NDC seat. What's your assessment of the party's relation with that region and Ho Central, for instance, being one of the largest constituencies, with regards to the number of votes they give to the party? Are they getting same from the party?
Aisha, this is where we have a problem. The problem is that we are looking at it as a symbiotic relationship. I vote for you, you come and give me accelerated development, irrespective of the other vote. The issue is, as soon as the national ballot is finished, everybody is a Ghanaian. It goes back to factory settings. That's how these things have always been. A political party cannot say that because this particular constituency gave me more votes than another constituency, then in my development plan as a government, if I am given the executive office, then I have to accelerate development in that particular constituency to the detriment of others. It has to be seen as a process that everybody will benefit from, as the country would be able to afford. So what is actually going on in Ho Central is the issue of how the campaign is finalized. When somebody standing for parliamentary office says, I am coming to build a road, or I'm coming to build a hospital, then people hold you accountable to those things that you said you are coming to do. Meanwhile, you know that as an MP, that is not your role. Your common fund percentage cannot even probably build up one structure. Yeah. So how are you going to build road, hospital, all those things that you promise? But people have always used that dynamic to win, to win power. It's not happening very well nowadays. In the early days of the Fourth Republic, the 92s and 96, maybe you could get away with it. Nowadays, every voter is deciding. If you say things like that, they say, this one is just coming to, fluff about and not really do much. That is, having said that, Ho Central is also very interesting because it actually reflects all the dynamics of a team contesting the primaries. Yeah. You have people who have gone 2-3 times. You have people who are assemblymen coming through that system. You have somebody who's a presiding member, former district chief executive. You have a very young person, a millennial, trying to go. So they have all the mix of the issues that we are. Then you have a very old person who is the incumbent. Now, the demography will be interesting. The person who is the incumbent, the old person, actually has a better demography than the rest. If you put the 5 together, they'll all be probably juggling for the rest. Yeah. He already has a set, consider, say, he is former, so they might come to his age.
I'll come back to that whole central conversation, because indeed it pulls a lot of votes for the NDC, and so we cannot lose sight of that. I'll take a break on our continuous coverage of the parliamentary primaries of the NDC across the country. It's still your election headquarters. Stick and stay with us.